Okay. So, Jeremy, I first met Jeremy at St. Augustine Sailing, where we were doing an instructor's clinic. And then I found him down at the Biscayne Bay National Institute. Did I get it right? Close enough. Okay. But Jeremy will be able to tell you more about it and about himself as well. But it is how many of you have been there to the Biscayne Bay and sailed around there? It is phenomenal. It is where the Keys start. Forget Key Largo. It's up there is where it all starts. And he had the pleasure of working there for a long time. I had the pleasure of working for him periodically. I was the substitute teacher when people needed to go have Christmas with their kids. So I got a chance to work for Jeremy down there. And I want to bring him up now and let him tell you all about Biscayne Bay and the Institute. Put your hands together for Jeremy. Jeremy Garza.
Thank you all for having me. I'm Jeremy Garza, and I'm a little nervous speaking in front of this many people. It's the first time I've done a presentation like this before. But I need to get used to it quick because in 11 days I will be giving lectures to a 600-person auditorium on a cruise ship in Alaska for 3 weeks about cetaceans of southern Alaska, which I am learning a lot about currently. It's fascinating stuff. But anyway, yes, just to tell you a little bit about myself, I grew up in Northern California, a town called Redding, which is not what a lot of people imagine California to be. I grew up on a farm and ranchers. I moved to the Virgin Islands when I was 22 years old, and that's where I fell in love with boating and diving and all of that. I made friends with the man who owned a sailboat pretty quickly, and I became a great passenger. I just did whatever he said. I shut up. I brought a guitar and got him beers whenever he wanted to. And the first sailing trip we did to Jost Van Dyke, I got to swim with a 60-foot humpback whale and her calf. It was quite the experience, and I was hooked. We spent the night in Jost Van Dyke, had a hammock between the mast and the forestay, and I didn't look back. I lived there for 14 years. I became a rescue diver and got a 100-ton master's license, and thanks to Jack, I'm an ASA instructor as well. So I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about the Biscayne National Park. I worked for the Biscayne National Park Institute. I was the director of operations there. We had 11 boats and 3 locations. We did have offered boat tours also out of the Everglades National Park. We had 1 boat tour out of there. But the Biscayne National Park is really one of the least known national parks in the entire park system. There's 63 total national parks right now, and this is a map of it. It's a lot of people say, "Oh, I know the Biscayne National Park, Biscayne Bay, Miami. I go there all the time." The national park actually starts just south of Miami. It is right up to the shoreline of Key Biscayne. That's the highest part on the island chain that you see there of land. The landmass there is Key Biscayne. And then it goes all the way to the northern part of Key Largo. A lot of people don't realize 1/3 of Key Largo, the northern third, is a private community that nobody can access. And it's called Ocean Reef, and so that whole area, we have over 30 keys in the national park, and it's 95% water. It is over 173,000 acres. And it is a national park that if you don't get on the water, you're not going to experience it. The visitor center is a bit underwhelming compared to other national parks I've been to. It does have a pretty view, but all of the best stuff is out on the water. And all of you as sailors have this great opportunity to sail down there and explore it. It's great for diving, it's great for fishing, it's great for snorkeling, and just the biggest reason that is that most people don't go there. Everyone goes to Key Largo, everyone goes to Isla Morada, further south, Marathon. But this is really a spot where you'll find some incredible treasure. And I'm going to tell you guys a lot about it, show you some slides. I'm going to start with just a little video that shows what the park looks like from bird's eye. So this is the visitor center. Has anybody been to the visitor center at Biscayne National Park? All right, so that's where it's at. It's actually in Homestead. We do offer boat tours out of Coconut Grove as well. And then we do have one tour, like I said, out of Flamingo in the Everglades National Park. So as you're sailing south, one of the first things that you guys will come across is the Fowey Rocks Lighthouse. And this is if you were to take the Oceanside down. If you took the Intracoastal, you could also see it in the distance. But the Fowey Rocks Lighthouse is really interesting. It is one of 6 lighthouses that were built in the Florida Keys back in the 1800s to protect ships that were running aground. There's estimated over 1,000 shipwrecks in the Florida Keys because of just how important the Florida Keys were to travel and transit back in the day before propulsion, when people used the trade winds and the Gulf Stream to get back to Europe, the old world. They had to come along the Florida Keys all the way up to the Carolinas before they headed over to Europe. And because of the Gulf Stream, ships heading south, trying to get out of the Gulf Stream, they would get closer to the reef. We have reef approximately 4 miles off of our keys, and you can barely see our keys to begin with. There's not much elevation, so you can imagine how easy it would be to run around with that kind of situation there. So the first of the lighthouses that you see when you head south is the Fowey Rocks Lighthouse. It was built in 1878, and it actually has a pretty interesting story. If you go there today, there's actually a mooring ball you can go to, and you will sit right above the Aratoon App Car. And this is the Aratoon App Car. There we go. It was a 261-foot long iron hold screw steamship, and it was going from Havana to Liverpool. And it ran aground within 100 yards of the Fowey Rocks Lighthouse when the lighthouse was 3 days prior to lighting and being completed. The workers were on the scaffolding sleeping as the ship approached and ran aground and almost hitting them. They were about to jump off the scaffolding. They thought they were going to die from this giant ship. And so, you know, what better reason to build a lighthouse than, and really proved the point of the whole building of that lighthouse. The next one, just to go through them all, there's the Carey's Fort, which was the oldest lighthouse in the Keys, Alligator, Sombrero, American Shoal. And then there was other unmanned light towers that are all through the Keys that you can explore. But the Fowey Rocks one is the only one that's in the Biscayne National Park. And another interesting fact is it was named after the HMS Fowey, which was a ship that ran aground, an English ship that ran aground. And in 2013, it was actually finally acknowledged by the US government that it belongs to Great Britain. So that whole area where the Fowey is, you're not allowed to go, and it's actually legitimately owned by Great Britain, which is an interesting, fun Jeopardy question fact that you might get one day. So I'm going to focus on the Boca Chica Key area. That is one of the northernmost keys as you guys are heading south. And it's really important because it's the only protected harbor in all of the Biscayne National Park where you can dock. And it's also a really interesting and cool island. But the reason why it's important is because there's really not great anchorages in the Biscayne National Park. And that's because of the limestone. It's an area where geologically things change from Miami, from the mainland, to the Florida Keys. In fact, Boca Chica is the only island that has both the Miami oolite, which is a type of limestone that you find on the mainland, and the Key Largo limestone, which is the limestone that you find from in the Keys. And both of them are used for construction and are very important, but it just shows you how this is like a transitional island where everything south of it turns to the Key Largo limestone, everything north of it has the Miami oolite. And because of the hard pan limestone seafloor, and then you get like maybe an inch of mud, and then it's all seagrass or a little bit of sand. So there's just really nothing to hold on to if you're anchoring out there. Surprisingly, the best anchor for that area would be a Danforth, because to grip into the seagrass, or just a heavy enough of any anchor. But in high winds, I wouldn't risk anchoring anywhere in the Biscayne National Park, even in the protected bays and coves, because of the situation there. So Boca Chica is a perfect option. It's $25 a night. They have bathrooms there. This is a great example of the turtle grass that we have there. The Biscayne National Park is really important for biodiversity, as a breeding ground for all kinds of animals, turtles. There's lagoons in there. It's very shallow. It's only 4 to 8 feet deep typically in the entire bay. The intracoastal is relatively shallow in many places too, so if you have a deep-keeled boat, you're definitely going to want to avoid it. But this is what the seafloor looks like. These seagrasses are so important for oxygen. An acre of this turtle grass, like thick seagrass like this, produces twice as much oxygen as the same acre of rainforest. And it sequesters 26 times the carbon dioxide of rainforest. So it's truly amazing what the Biscayne National Park has as far as biodiversity. And that's another reason why I discourage anchoring in there, even though we would do it daily with all 11 of our boats, because we had to. They don't have mooring balls in the bay. But I was able to design, one thing I'm really proud of is I was able to design a trip line where I could just pull the anchors right out of the seagrass without ripping it up. Because otherwise, you pull your anchor up, I mean, it's taking a lot of the seagrass with it, not to mention what's been dragging around if you have high winds. There's turtle grass. This is shoal grass. We also have manatee grass that all lives there. Another interesting part of the Biscayne National Park and anchoring around there, and why I would discourage it, is because of the sponges. So this is the loggerhead sponge. They can get quite large. I've seen them up to maybe 2.5 feet in diameter. An average basketball-sized loggerhead sponge, probably similar to this one, can filter an entire Olympic-sized pool in 24 hours. And you go into some of the lagoons that we have in the Biscayne National Park, where we have to go by paddleboard or kayaking, just because they don't have their non-combustion areas, engine areas. It's always crystal clear. It doesn't matter if it's blowing 40 miles per hour with 10-foot seas offshore. In these lagoons, it's always crystal clear because of these sponges. So, and they're everywhere, hundreds of them. So it's another thing to keep in mind that you'll probably pull up or drag over if you did anchor in the bay. And if you're stopping for an hour to have lunch, of course, it's no big deal. There are some sandy spots too. It's more just if you get a squall or high winds. All of our sailboats would drag. It's just, and they had substantial anchors and chain and everything. It's just, there's nothing to grip onto. So this is really interesting, and I know you guys didn't sign up for a marine biology lecture, but I just think it's important to recognize how incredible a lot of the natural world is. So this is a sponge that's found in the Florida Keys. Its proper name is Tectophia crypta. This sponge, a German scientist in the 1950s, I mean, you can't make this stuff up, was diving in the Keys and came across this and realized somehow that because of their defense mechanism, by the way, these are animals. There's males and females. The males release sperm. I mean, it's really wild to think that something that looks like a rock is alive and what it does. But this German scientist was able to find out there's 2 compounds in it, 2 molecules in this particular sponge. And the molecules in this sponge are currently used to treat leukemia, HIV, pancreatic cancer, breast cancer, and bladder cancer. And so just an example, I know you guys are all aware of all of the medical advancements in the last 50 years, but I just think it's really cool. So moving on to Boca Chica. It's the only island in the Biscayne National Park that looks like a tropical paradise. And that's because the owner of it in the 1930s, who was very wealthy, he's somebody you all know his name very well. He landscaped it with coconut trees, which are not native to Florida, as well as other tropical trees. Built this basin for docking this bay, and his name is Mark Honeywell. He's on all your thermostats, and he is the person who is responsible for Boca Chica looking the way it is. I'm going to show some pictures. This is him here. That's his wife, Eugenia, which is his second wife. His first wife actually died due to a fall that happened on Boca Chica. There's all kinds of local lore and horror stories and ghost stories at nighttime that talk about how she fell off the lighthouse and that she's still there her spirit tormenting sailors. But whatever the case, I've spent the night there and I didn't hear her. This is a cool video. Drones are not allowed in the national park, in any of the national parks, I'm pretty sure. But this was, the national park actually hired a helicopter to fly, and I got access to their archives, so it's a fun video. This lighthouse is 65 feet tall. It was built in the 30s when Mark Honeywell was developing the island. He never wanted to live there. He actually built all of this stuff, including a 4-car garage, a chapel, an ice house, which ended up being like a cistern and a water well, all so that he could throw one party once a year to all of his rich friends and show off. And he would, on a barge, bring out all of his cars, which of course were the newest models of all the luxury cars at the time in the 1930s, put them in his garage, or have people bring them out to him. He would bring out elephants, circus elephants, and they would set up the whole island to be this wonderful playground. His group was called the Committee of 100, and this was during the Great Depression. The richest people, I like to think they were just escaping poor people and partying, but according to their manifesto, they were strategizing on ways to improve the economy, which they probably were too. So, like I said, it's $25 to dock here. I'm gonna show some more pictures. It's really a great island, very beautiful with the lighthouse. They do open up the lighthouse twice a day for visitors that are there. So if you're there at the time, it's like, I think around 11:30 a.m. and then again at around 3:30 p.m. They will open it up. You can camp there as well, but a great protected harbor. This cannon was recovered from a shipwreck called the Winchester that Mark Honeywell had placed there, and he would actually fire it off with blanks, I'm sure. It's never been documented what, but every time a new boat would enter, because it was, at the time, a lot of his wealthy friends all lived in Miami, and so they would come over. And that's really what he built the lighthouse for. It was never a navigational aid. It was on the wrong side of the island to be a navigational aid. It was, in fact, was never lit up properly to begin with. It was more a big lawn ornament. Here's another shot, a little pavilion there. Also, feel free at any time if you guys have any questions, just shout out. They do have a little beach here that you can swim around. It's a nice wading beach. We do, from time to time, get these little makeshift vessels that are brought over from Cuba. We've had Haitian refugees come up and onto our shores. We've had a lot of Cuban refugees. So this is just an example of one of those that was found adrift. They get close enough to the shoreline and head out. It's not uncommon at all. So this is further south in the Biscayne National Park. This has Adams Key, Totten Key, Old Rhodes Key, and a few other ones that are there that are smaller. the Caesars Creek Channel. This is one of the main channels to enter the Biscayne National Park from the ocean. Where that blue line is on the inside, up on the northwest section, is pretty close to what the Intracoastal Waterway line is. So that's the way you would go if you were on the Intracoastal. I would say if you head up to anything 6 feet or less draft, you'd be fine in the Intracoastal. Anything more, I would recommend go in the ocean. There's also Hawk Channel, which is a channel that goes all the way down the Florida Keys on the ocean side. So this is Adams Key. It's just for day use, but there are some really cool spots around there. If you have a dinghy, you could go from there and do some really cool exploring. Some of those lagoons I was telling you about, if you had a kayak or a paddleboard as well. But Adams Key has some pretty interesting history. This guy here on the right, his name was Carl Fisher, and he bought the patent for kerosene headlights back in like the 1920s and became very wealthy. He also was very into cars. He's the guy that actually built the Old Dixie Highway, as well as other highways, and also built the track that the Indianapolis 500 is on. He was from Indiana, and he was super connected. So he invited a bunch of his very connected president types to the Adams Key. He later sold it to a guy named Garwood. He actually went bankrupt and died penniless on Miami Beach after the Great Depression wiped him out. And then he sells it to a guy who then sells it to this guy in the white shirt. I know this is a pretty small picture. Let me see if I can get this any bigger. I'm not sure. But we have B.B. Rebozo was the guy that bought it. And he's the guy in the white shirt on the top. And the guy that has his arm around him is President Nixon. They were best friends. And beyond best friends, if you learn about their relationship, it was pretty spectacular. So much so that a reputable journalist actually wrote an entire book about how him and Nixon were gay lovers. It's mostly been discredited, but if you heard some of the stories, you would wonder. And I mean, for example, Nixon bought the house next door to his. Nixon set the record for the most amount of times to visit the same place, and it was Key Biscayne and B.B. Rebozo. B.B. had his own entrance at the White House that didn't have to be documented. He had his own room. And there was a great story of right after Watergate where a senator was in St. Martin and saw these two men wrestling in the water. And he's like, man, these idiots. And it ends up being Nixon and B.B. Rebozo. And they were playing for like 2 hours, wrestling on the surf right after Watergate. They really had a remarkable relationship. Recently, just a few years back, there was a book written about presidents and their best friends and how they infiltrate, or maybe not infiltrated, but had an influence on policy and the world. And they showcased 5 presidents, and they did the rounds of all the talk shows, and everybody wanted to ask him about the B.B. Rebozo and Nixon story, which he showcased, highlighted, about the rumors about them being gay. And he, of course, said that that's not true, but it was kind of the focal point of the entire book, because there was probably not a president that had one best friend who was, so influential, and they spent so much time together. We also have Eisenhower in the blue shirt, and in the hat in the front is Johnson. So this was all in Adams Key in the Biscayne National Park. And although the Coco Lobo K Club, which was the resort that was there, has been destroyed from hurricanes and fires, it's no longer there. There's now rangers that live there, and it's still a cool place to explore and check out. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about the history of the Biscayne National Park, which I find really fascinating. And it really kind of centers around this guy right here, Israel Lafayette Jones. He was born in Raleigh, North Carolina, 4 years before the emancipation. So we just assume he was born into slavery, although there's no official documentation. But he was just an overachieving type. He moved to Wilmington as a young man. He became a stevedore, unloading and loading freight on the Wilmington Harbor. He learned how to sail. He was literate, hardworking, honest, just built a great reputation. And he started meeting the deckhands on the ships who were telling him about Florida. This would have been like the 1870s. So in the 1870s, there was only one real city in all of Florida that had just a bustling metropolis with a bustling town center and economy. Does anybody have a guess of what that one city in all of Florida in like the early 1870s was? What's that? St. Augustine? Key West. It is Key West. St. Augustine, it was before Flagler's time. There was people that lived there. It's the longest continuous city, but it didn't have like a bustling metropolis like Key West did. Key West actually had the highest per capita income for a while, and it was just a melting pot and just bustling, and it was because of like I mentioned, all those ships that had to get back to Europe all still had to go through the Florida Keys to get back to follow the Gulf Stream and the trade winds and get back to Europe. And so why not stop in the funnest, coolest island that has all the supplies you could want and all the entertainment you can want? And so they told him about Key West. It was also very multicultural. Bahamians, the British Bahamians, Cubans, were all living in Key West. They kind of did their own thing, and it was very multicultural. So I'm sure these deckhands were telling him, hey, you should go there. There's money, it's cool. And he did. He took off, but he ended up in Coconut Grove. And Coconut Grove is a little town right outside of Miami. It's on a hill. So it was the only elevated area in Miami that was safe from what later became the Everglades, so the flooding that was the Everglades at the time before they dammed it up, as well as hurricanes. And so there was some plantations there. There was a hotel. The only hotel in Florida at the time, South Florida at the time, was there. It was called the Peacock Inn. And Israel got a job working at the Peacock Inn. And that's where he found his wife, Moselle, who was the cook slash housekeeper. They fell in love. Israel was very industrious. So not only was he working there, he was also working for multiple plantation owners. One guy lived on Biscayne, Key Biscayne, who owned 500 acres. He helped that man build a house for himself and also took care of his plants. I mean, this is a guy who knew how to sail. He was a farmer. kind of did it all. It was perfect for that area, and again, built a great reputation. At this time, Elliott Key, a lot of people were going there to get the Homestead Act, 60 free acres of land. The Homestead Act allowed for African Americans to take part in it as well. Him and Mizell could have gone to Elliott Key and got 60 free acres. I'm not going to go into the reasons why he would choose not to go to an island and be the only African American couple there, but they saved up $300 and they bought their own key. And they bought Porgy Key, which was in that cluster of keys that I showed you earlier, right here. So Porgy Key is right here. You see the printer, the pointer? And so they bought that for $300. They cleared the land, built a dock, started growing pineapples like everybody else did. And that was a predominant crop in the area. Tomatoes in the off season. Started having kids. They had 2 sons. The first son they named King Arthur. The second son they named Sir Lancelot. And Israel started planting lime trees as well. Even though they weren't a very common crop, they couldn't it didn't compete with tomatoes and pineapples. He grew some too, because, and it might have been from Mizell living in the Bahamas. She brought them. We're not positive, but whatever the case, he had a small orchard of lime trees as well. And that ended up being very fortuitous for him. A big hurricane in 1906 came and killed a lot of people in the Keys, destroyed everybody's pineapples. But the lime survived. And Israel was able to not only have a crop the upcoming year when everyone else didn't, but he was also able to double down and even plant more limes, recognizing there could be more hurricanes in the future. It's like an insurance policy. And the reason why it was such a good move on his part and how it ended up helping him is 2 things happened in the years that followed that hurricane. One was the Henry Flagler built his railroad to Miami, and that was a game changer for small farmers like Israel. Before that, you used to have to own your own schooner and sail 5 days up to Maryland or New York, Virginia, to sell your crops. You know, there wasn't many people living in South Florida at the time. With Flagler's railroad, now all you had to do was just sail to Miami, put it on the train, and you're making money. And so that was huge for him. The second thing was the Gin Rickey was became overnight the #1 cocktail in Manhattan. And it came with a lime, and it was like one of the first cocktails that came with a fruit. So it was a big deal. Everyone wanted to have one. And all of a sudden there's this huge demand for limes. And here is Israel with the largest lime grove, closest to Miami. And then he's very smart. As soon as he gets the money, he buys the next island next to it, Totten Key. Big island. And then he buys Old Rhodes Key. And he, at his peak, has about 200 acres of lime trees. Becomes the largest lime distributor in all of Florida, and is making roughly around $10,000 a year. And this is like, 1909, 1910, so big money for that time. He's not a millionaire or anything, but he's comfortable. And he ends up helping to start a church for African Americans in Miami that's still there, called the Mount Zion Baptist Church. He goes on to, he also helps to build a college for African Americans right here in Jacksonville. And it ends up moving to St. Augustine, and both of his sons attended. It was called the Florida Baptist Academy. So I'd kind of forgotten, actually, his connection to here, to Jacksonville and St. Augustine. That's really cool. So here's a picture of his family. with his pineapples. Him and Mazel, they used to dress the boys up in these like sun dresses, which I think is hilarious. But they did very well for themselves. And it's not just a interesting story. Lancelot plays probably the biggest role in the foundation and the creation of the Biscayne National Park of anybody. And that is because in the 1960s, early 1960s, there is a huge push for industrialization and development in this area. A man named Daniel Ludwig, who at one point was the richest man in America. He started out in Michigan. He bought a submerged barge during the Great Depression, fixed it up, and turned that into an international shipping company where he had oil tankers and shipping container ships. And he set his sights on the area that's a Biscayne National Park. He bought like 30,000 acres in the entire bay, and his goal was to create Sea Dade, which was going to be the largest shipping port in the entire East Coast. That was his goal. He wanted, he also had plans to build a chemical plant, to build a oil refinery, and to build a plastic manufacturing plant, all in what is now the Biscayne Bay, where the Biscayne National Park was. So I told you that bay is only like 48 feet deep, right? It's very shallow. Well, that wasn't much of a hurdle for Daniel Ludwig, because dynamite was the way you made channels deeper back in those days, and that was his plan, was to dynamite the entire bay. By the way, it's 8 miles, roughly 8 miles from Adams Key, where Caesars Creek Inlet is, all the way to the mainland. So, and then 4 miles through the Barrier Reef. 30 feet deep, 300 feet wide. So 12 miles he was going to dynamite, and not to mention the 4 by half mile area mooring field that he wanted to build as well. Even proponents of it were like, yeah, it's going to destroy the bay, but progress and, you know. So this was considered imminent at the time. The Miami Herald put out full-page ads promoting it. There was nobody saying anything negative about it at all. It was just considered that it was going to happen. There was also plans to develop Elliott Key, which was the biggest key in the Biscayne, what is now the Biscayne National Park, 8 miles by, it's 8 miles by about a half mile wide. And the problem with the developing Elliott Key was they really wanted to make the overseas highway that takes you to Key West today go through Miami and through these keys. So they got tentative approval to build a causeway from Key Biscayne to Boca Chica, which is the northernmost key. But then they wanted bridges to connect to Key Largo so people could drive all the way through, because these guys can't make money if people can't drive there. And so that's where Lancelot came in, because Israel and Mazel passed away by the time it's the 1960s. King Arthur went to fight in World War I and World War II, survived both world wars, total badass. But he dies in the early 60s due to complications from battle wounds. And so Lancelot, neither of them had any children. Lancelot is the sole heir of his dad's property. And just go back to that map here. And you can see Key Largo is on the bottom in the south. Elliott Key is the landmass north where they wanted to develop. They called it Islandia. And to this day, if you go on Google Maps and look at that area, it says Islandia there, because they did so much infrastructure on paper to make a town out of this island that at the time nobody lived on, just to attract developers. So they came to Lancelot knowing that they needed his land. They needed old roads, Totten Key, Porgy Key, so that the bridges could connect to Key Largo. And they offered to make him the mayor of Islandia. And at first he was for it, but once he found out the plans that they were going to turn Elliott Key into the new Miami Beach, rip out all of the mangroves, clear cut the entire island, bring in millions of tons of imported sand, just like they did in Miami Beach. And in his lifetime, he saw the decline of fishing. He was an avid fisherman. This guy knew the Latin names to all the sponges, to the fish. I mean, he was in that world. He was actually also a fishing guide for all the presidents, because he became the fishing guide for the Coco Lobo K Club and spent countless hours with these presidents, which is unheard of during segregation. And he was educated. He had gone to college, which was not as common back then for anybody, let alone an African-American man. So to make a long story short, thank you guys for sitting through all this. He refuses to sell his land, and in doing so, allows the creation of the Biscayne National Park. He would have made, it was $7 million that his property was worth at the time if he had allowed bridges to be built to it. Instead, he sells it for $1.2 million to the national park, and knows that its legacy will forever be solidified as a protected landmass, which he really was important to him. He said he liked the idea of it being called a monument. It first was a national monument, but he secured life rights. That was part of his deal. He wanted to live on Porgy Key. It's a 54-acre island his entire life, and he almost pulled it off. In 1992, Hurricane Andrew came, straight shot right at Porgy Key. He had survived all of the hurricanes since then. And, those of you who know hurricane history of South Florida, there's been some big ones that killed a lot of people. 1936 comes to mind. My wife's family from Okeechobee, they helped bury a lot of the people that died from the dikes that failed during that big hurricane. And at the age of 91 years old, Lancelot had to give up and move to Miami. So this was his house on Porgy Key. And then this was it after Hurricane Andrew. So that's what's left of it. The national park is currently talking about making this like a historic site. It already is, but they want to start publicizing it more and maybe allowing some guests to go there. Because currently, I haven't even been there. I don't even know exactly where it's at. It's kind of not necessarily a secret, but it's also so overgrown. It's really tough to get into these spots. But they're talking about making it more accessible. And what's really interesting is that up until 92, because Biscayne National Park became a monument in 1968, became a national park in 1980, all the way up till 1992, Lancelot was living there. And he didn't get any recognition. And he didn't want it. And it wasn't even like there was recognition to give. This has been one of the least known national parks in America. Even the rangers who knew Lancelot didn't recognize really how substantial his decisions were in refusing to. Because he didn't talk about it. He wasn't one of those people that went out there. And it really wasn't until he died that he was appreciated. at the level that, you can imagine any other national park, somebody does so much for it, he'd be heralded as, especially nowadays with social media. But it's a really interesting story, a very humble man who just wanted to live on the property where he grew up his whole life and protect it for all of us to go and explore. So the developers that wanted to make Islandia on Elliott Key, they were really upset that he didn't sell his land and be part of Islandia, which at first he agreed to. He wanted to sell some of his land. He wanted to build bridges out there. He thought it'd be people that would appreciate it, though, not the wide scale, development like Miami Beaches, which is what Islandia wanted to do. So after it was set to become a national monument, it was set in stone, the Islandia group, in one last-ditch effort, brought a bulldozer on a barge out to Elliott Key and made this highway, the entire 8 miles of it, a 6-lane highway. And the national park refers to it as the Spite Highway. And you can hike it to this day. I'd recommend in the wintertime, because of the mosquitoes. They don't spray in the national park for bugs, so you don't want to even get anywhere near even Elliott Key. Even the dock at Elliott Key in the summertime is swarmed with mosquitoes, and it's pretty bad. So this is the Spite Highway. If you guys are hikers and want to go check it out, sail down there. So the last thing I'm going to tell you guys about, if there's any divers out there, anybody into diving? All right. Well, there's some really cool shipwrecks in the Biscayne National Park. They have what's called the Maritime Heritage Trail, which are these shipwrecks. 5 of them are listed here. And the Alicia Earl King, Mandalay. And there's not much left of them, really. It's mostly debris. The best shape is the Mandalay, which I'm going to show you a little video I made, the next slide, of what it looks like. But it's just historically interesting, and these, again, they don't get a lot of visitors. Most people go to Key Largo and further down. There's great snorkeling in the Biscayne National Park because of that, because it doesn't get the crowds damaged it. We did have I think it was 3 years ago now, a major bleaching event of, we had the hottest water temperatures ever recorded in the Florida Keys, and it did kill a lot of the coral. So diving, if for those of people who want to get into snorkeling and all of this, enjoy the reefs, I can see a time in the not too distant future where diving is going to be the only way you'll get to see them because of the sea temperatures killing a lot of the shallower reef that you could snorkel, unfortunately. But I've seen it with my own eyes, and talking to people just in the last 40 years, the decline of the reefs in the Florida Keys has been astounding. But these are shipwrecks here. We have the Eritu Napcar that I was telling you about. It's right next to Foley Rocks. We have the Lugano. The Mandalay was the most recent wreck, and that was in 1966. It was New Year's Eve night, and the captain was actually only 23 years old. He was Dutch. And this was part of the Windjammer fleet. You guys familiar with the Windjammers? They had awesome cruises. I used to see them in the Virgin Islands up until recently. I think they just went out of business like 10 years ago. It's been kind of recent. They had a long, illustrious run. Really beautiful schooners, very high-end accommodations. But it was 1966. The captain went to sleep early, I'm guessing partying. But maybe that's, maybe I'm just projecting there, and has the first mate drive the boat and gets off course and runs aground on our reef there. And All of the passengers was safe. Everybody survived, but the entire boat, this was like at the end of the wreck salvaging era in the Florida Keys. In 24 hours, that boat was picked clean. Like, I mean, it was like just a full-blown professional operation of salvaging everything off of a boat, and because they had been doing it for years, and that was a big reason why there was so much wealth in Key West for so long, was because of wreck salvaging. It's really fascinating. It's a subject for another time. So I'm going to end it with this video of the Mandalay, which is great for snorkeling, great for diving. There's 3 mooring balls on it, really easy to get to. It's been a pleasure. Thank you guys for having me here. Thank you, Jack.
Yeah. Jeremy, thank you so much. Does anybody have questions for Jeremy?
Over-harvested? No, and it's actually one of the really rare ones. So, but it is for medicinal purposes. They do all of that in laboratories. Mm-hmm. Um, we we So one of the best things about the Biscayne National Park is the Gulf Stream pushes everything north. My God, if Miami was south of the Biscayne National Park, it wouldn't be anywhere near as beautiful as it is today. So we really benefit from the Gulf Stream, and there. That being said, there is also good, surprisingly amazing diving north of Miami. Boynton Beach blew my mind. It's probably the best diving in all of Florida as far as health of the reef. So there are places that are, but the biggest threat to the sponges is cold water, actually. They had a bad spell. There was twice where almost all the sponges died, and it was from a cold freeze that went through, killed them. There's other indicators of health of the ecosystem and the reef that have failed. The biggest one is the spiny urchins. So there is very, very little spiny urchins left in all of the Florida Keys. If you guys any of you have ever dove or snorkeled in the Caribbean, they're everywhere. And that is, one of those canary in the coal mine types of things that is a sign of ecosystems collapse. And they went away in the 1990s. All the urchins died, and it was a big deal. And to this day they're studying it, and all they know is that it's due to pollution and stress, and I other than that I don't know, but there's no doubt the Florida Keys, the reefs are in decline and have been for a long time. And that's just a fact. Yep. How close is the Gulf Stream to the park? So it is about 12 miles. So some places closer, further down by Marathon, sometimes it's like as close as 7-8 miles off of, it does fluctuate and move, but yeah, you can get out there, in not even a very fast boat in like half an hour. The water temperature of the park, is it affected by the Gulf Stream? It is, because the warm water from down south brings it up. But it's equally as affected by rain. The biggest reason we had that heating event where it bleached all the coral about 3 years ago. It was, I lived in the Virgin Islands 14 years, and then I've lived in Florida now 15 years. I had never seen a period in the middle of summer, this was like July, where it didn't rain for like over 2 weeks, not once. And that was the biggest factor in it. And I don't know why that is, or what, if there's anything telling about that, but that was, the rain cools down the ocean water. And you guys know how it is in the summertime. It rains, to go a week without rain in the middle of July is rare, let alone 2 weeks. And so that did it. It just heated up so quick. And then after sustained warm temperatures, the reef just turned white. And it's not everywhere. There's still some places to go that are good. It's mostly the shallowest spots that were hit, but some really good snorkel spots that we love to go to were affected. Anybody else? All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you, Jeremy. Very interesting topic. So how many of you are going to go down to the Biscayne Bay? Check it out. Yes. And you don't need to bring your boat, right? The Institute still runs operations there. They've got a couple of big sailboats that you can go out for the day. They've got the, what do you call that? It takes 40 passengers. Yep, so you can go down there and jump on board for a lot less than dragging your boat all the way down there.